Hello, my patrons, and welcome back to a whole new thing. It's kind of like a new thing here. So this is. I'm actually really excited about this. As you can see, if you're watching the video version, a little bit of a different setup here at my desk. I've got a microphone installed, making things a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. Preparing for the moment when I move this. As you can hear, that's North Korea about to airdrop us. I don't know. Do you guys ever think that? Whenever I hear an airplane overhead, like, it was a bad airplane sound effect, but I always just think that this is going to be it. This is when they drop the bomb, but maybe that's just me. I'm kind of a nihilist. So this whole setup is kind of just me preparing for the audio only version of my podcast, where I can just do it from my desk and I can do it remotely, have a lot more people, a lot more friends of mine on the podcast, talk to a lot of people that I know that I just can't ever have on because I, in the past, only did it exclusively through video. So giving me some flexibility. But then the really cool thing for you guys is that now this is an extra piece of content that I can bring to Patreon. And what I mean is that I'm starting to do more interviews for my YouTube channel. So talking with experts to help me really, I'm like I said in some of my videos at the beginning of the year, is I don't want to be seen as an expert. I'm not an expert in a lot of these things when it comes to food, when it comes to diet and health and wellness and all this stuff, even habit change. I'm more of an experimenter. I'm trying to figure this stuff out for myself. So it's nice to have experts on that can add a little bit of credibility, but also help me to break down some of the stuff that I really have no idea about. So in the episode today, it's going to be with Becca Shern from minimalwellness.com. She's incredibly intelligent, registered dietitian. She has a lot of amazing writing on the topic of eating healthy and living a full and balanced life. So what I'm going to do is kind of I'm turning these interviews, which aren't in a podcast format, into a podcast for you guys. So this, is a 30-minute conversation here. I'll usually open up like this and just talk a little bit about what the conversation is about. And then as I do more of these, it can be anywhere from like 1 to maybe 4 at most in a month. And then I can pop these over here with my AMAs. So I'm going to be releasing this as an audio. If you have the audio podcast that I release here on Patreon, make sure that you go and get that on your favorite podcasting app, so then you can get all of these interviews there. And of course, I will be posting the video here as well. But something I'm excited about. I think this is kind of cool. It's fun. It feels more relaxed for me. But yeah, that's cool. Today, I'm talking with Becca Shern about the main interview was for the video that I released. I believe it's going to be today when I put this out, on sugar and carbs and our diets. I quit sugar for 30 days, and I wanted to talk with her to help me understand. I had heard that carbs break down into sugar in the body, and I'm wondering, is that the same thing as the sugar, that the processed and added sugar that we have in a lot of the meals that people are trying to get rid of? So she helped me to really understand that. But then while I had her, I figured, I'd ask her some questions that might be helpful to you guys. So we talk about energy levels, how to maintain balance in those energy levels, sleep deprivation and why sleep is so important. And I also do a rapid fire with her where I make her answer some difficult questions in a sentence about gluten, protein shakes, fat, saturated fat, all that stuff, all the paleo, everything that's kind of everybody has an opinion about online. I figured I might as well just throw it at her and give her this constraint of answering it very quickly. So that's something to look forward to at the end of this episode. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. This is Becca Shern. Enjoy the podcast, and I'll see you guys later. Well, Bex, thank you so much for sitting down and helping me with this, because I did as much research as I could. I tried to learn about sugar, and then it really all started when some of my friends were like, hey, carbs turn into sugar in the body, so are you going to cut out carbs? And I was like, I'm not cutting out all food. Like, I want, you know what I mean? Like, I just want to get rid of sugar. Yeah. So I'm hoping you can help me kind of break down, when people decide to get sugar out of the diet, what does that usually look like? What kind of sugars are people usually trying to cut out?
Yeah. So most people, when they're trying to cut out sugar, they're talking about added sugar. So sugar that gets added to a processed food, a cooked food, a food that you might make in your own home, food item you might make in your own home. So that's like table sugar or honey or high fructose corn syrup or coconut sugar or agave, right? Like all of those are forms of added sugar. And what a lot of us do when we're trying to scale back our added sugar is we'll do this sort of challenge that you did where you do like no added sugar for 30 days. I personally have not done such a challenge. Not that I don't think it has, helpful.
It's total bullshit.
No, it actually can be super, super helpful. And I like both like the dietary implications of doing an experiment like that, because you learn a lot about your tendencies and where sugar is in your diet. It can be really educational, and also like how your body feels without sugar in it is a really good baseline to establish.
Do you think, like, in terms of dieting and trying to find what works best for you personally, do you recommend people do these kinds of experiments?
Yeah.
Whether it's gluten or it's carbs or it's sugar?
I think it's a really good thing to play around with, because so many of us just aren't eating well normally, or at least when you're first learning about nutrition, when you're first starting to learn about and pay attention to health, like doing some experiments where you're like, well, what would my body feel like if I didn't eat gluten for 30 days or 60 days? Or what if I pull sugar all the way out? What do I feel like when I do that? The couple caveats are that can induce extremism, right? So like certain people are prone to just going overboard with things, and it can lead you down the path of unnecessarily restrictive eating in the long run, which obviously is not a good thing. It can lead to eating disorders, which are extremely dangerous and deadly. But on the other side, it can really illuminate patterns that you have established. It can illuminate ways that your body responds to certain foods. So like figuring out if you have food sensitivities to gluten, for example, or to dairy. Like you can do testing, but a really effective way of figuring it out without the expense is just to pull it out of your diet for a while and slowly add it back in if you want to, and see how you feel.
Food is amazing. We love food, right?
Love food.
I'm very good with my words. But when you think about like travel, when I think about like a lot of the great experiences I've had in my life, it's been around food.
Yeah.
So to deprive yourself of really great foods and foods with sugar and dessert seems extreme for the long run. So how much sugar is too much sugar?
So anything over 10% of your total calorie needs in a day is too much added sugar. So if you're getting more than 10% of your calories from added sugar, that's too much. Generally, it's recommended that you're somewhere under, ideally, 5% of your calories from added sugar. So for a 2,000 calorie diet, that's 25 grams of added sugar. And that can add up fast, right? Like the bottle of kombucha that I like to drink, if I drink the whole bottle, and it's 2 servings, so like the whole bottle, it's got 12 grams of added sugar in it. It's technically from juice, I believe, in the kind that I like, but it's a concentrated form of sugar, so like I'll count that. But that's 12 grams out of 25 grams in a day. So it can add up. That 5% threshold is really low. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do is aim for that 5%. I don't track anything on a regular basis. Like every now and then I'll pay attention to protein, or I'll pay especially close attention to sugar. But like, this is my career, so I know a lot about food. It's easier for me to just kind of eyeball things and ballpark things. But for some people, it can be really really helpful to track and to pay attention to the numbers for a while and help you learn. But yeah, that 25 gram threshold is pretty low. Or the 37 gram threshold for like a higher calorie limit is kind of what they talk about for men. What I like to think of is that's a rough target, right? And so some days I'm under that. Many days I'm under that. And some days, many days, I'm over that, right? And so the way to look at an average is it's not, you're not aiming for 25 grams of sugar every day. It's like over the course of a week, over the course of a month, like some days are really low, some days are quite high. So that is where you can get the flexibility to have dessert on a special occasion, or take your kid out for ice cream occasionally. Have the flexibility to enjoy the things that life provides from like a culinary standpoint, but that for sugar especially, that those treats are actually treats. And I think that that's where, as a culture, we've really like got off track, is we no longer have sugar relegated to desserts or special occasions, right? It's like in everything because we eat so much processed food.
Yeah, and it was surprising even for me. Like, I had watched Fed Up and these documentaries, and I read a lot of blog posts about how much sugar is in everything, and I knew it, but then I was still surprised by certain things, like my granola, my almond milk, my granola bar was like 30 grams of sugar, and I'm like, that's why it tastes so good. And it's hard. I think it takes like really like looking at everything you're purchasing and really understanding that if it tastes too good to be true, it's probably.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why food manufacturers put a lot of added sugar in things. It tastes good. It makes you want to buy it again. It's really straightforward. The problem is it's terrible for us. And so, we have to take it upon ourselves to be proactive about paying attention to sugar and realizing that it really does matter, even though it's in everything. Like, it doesn't mean we can eat it all day, every day.
So my approach going forward after the 30 days is going to be to do just one cheat meal a week, inspired by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He has these epic cheat meals where he eats like 300 pancakes at once. I tried to do that. I had like a dozen donuts, and I got through 1.5 after no sugar at all for 30 days, and I was like, I feel sick.
Yeah.
So it's like, is that unhealthy to like binge once a month on treats? Is that something that you find is pretty common among the health world?
That's a hard question. So I don't like the term binge, and I don't typically gravitate toward the idea of a cheat meal, because binge especially, cheat meal less so, but it leads you down the path of the mental framework of restriction and then binging. And that cycle can spiral easily in some people. And so it gets really, really restrictive and then really crazy binges, right?
Seems like a kind of personality that would be attracted to
that. Personality, especially with sugar, like it can get really easy to do. Yeah. But yes, in terms of like a day where you don't worry so much about what you're doing, perhaps diet-wise, you can call that a cheat day if you want. Mm-hmm. Okay, like I think lots of us do that naturally, when we're more fluid with how we eat and our health. I think a very sort of intuitive approach is that some days you eat really, really well without thinking a whole lot about it, and some days you eat less healthfully without thinking a whole lot about it. It's just kind of like how your life ebbs and flows. And so putting some more structure around that and saying like, no, like I'm going to think a lot about the sugar that I take in Monday through Friday, and then Saturday I'm going to say I'm not paying any attention and then maybe even Saturday and Sunday. Like, I just am not gonna like worry about the labels. I'm gonna order what like I kind of feel like ordering at restaurants or whatever, and then going back to like paying more attention Monday through Friday. Not really a cheat meal or a cheat day, but more like it's a little looser,
right?
And also not as intense. Like when you like set a whole day up as like a cheat day, then it's just like
off to the races.
500 pancakes later.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that you're not going to feel good after that, right?
No,
like
you don't.
You feel awful.
Yeah.
And so I just think that like it's okay to ease up from time to time, but like don't do the opposite of easing up, which is like just go full intensity into like
I don't know. I think
undoing all of the good.
I think it's gonna work.
Right? Like,
I'm gonna try it. Maybe 30 days of cheat meals.
Cheat meals.
I think the thing that I was most confused about when I started to do my research was finding out that carbs reduce to sugar in the body. So I'm thinking like, are carbs just as bad as the sugars that we find in snacks? And what does that look like inside the body? Is it essentially the same thing?
Yeah. No. Yes and no. So, because there were a couple different questions there. So like, yes, carbohydrates do get digested down into their building block single sugar components. Okay, so carbohydrates are just varying chain lengths of sugar molecules. So you get individual sugar molecules, monosaccharides as they're called. You get those, and depending on what type of carbohydrate is in the food, it gets linked together in long chains, sometimes branched chains, and your body has to break all of those individual chains into the single molecules to digest it. So yes, carbohydrates of any variety will get digested into single sugar molecules. They're not nearly the same thing. So added sugar, by and large, is going to be sugars that are made up of two molecules, so just two instead of chains of hundreds or thousands of sugar molecules. And so those two get digested into that one link gets broken quickly, and you digest it really quickly and absorb it really quickly. So it impacts your blood sugar a lot faster to get added sugar, to get your sugars from added sugar as opposed to from carbohydrates. So when you're having something like a black bean, one single black bean.
As you do.
Like you would. When you have black beans, for example, or like beans and rice, which is primarily carbohydrate, it's super highly structured carbohydrates. So there's a ton of chains and branches that your body has to go through and break in order to get all of those carbohydrates into their single molecule form so that you can digest them. So it takes a long time, and it impacts your blood sugar very differently. You also get things like fiber, protein, sometimes fat, depending on what you're eating. And so all of those things are going to influence how quickly you're digesting those foods.
So we can keep carbs.
You can keep carbs.
That's good. You should, right?
Most people need to keep carbs.
Some people do the keto, which is something I might experiment with later.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story.
It's
I don't think we should go down there.
We don't
I'll have you back on.
We don't want to go down that rabbit
hole. Yeah, that's
hole.
insane.
But yeah, so I think it does behoove us to talk a little bit about how different people process sugar differently. We all have different, depending on where we are in life, our health histories, how active we've been, how many different diseases we've had, how many antibiotics we've taken, right? Like our bodies are all really different as much as we like to think we're the same. And we process sugars very differently. We process carbohydrates very differently. So I might be able to handle 30 grams of added sugar per day pretty well. Another person might really need to have a lower limit than that. Same with carbohydrate intake overall. So, a diet of 60% carbs might work really well for some people, usually people that are in really good health and are pretty active, and they use the sugar that comes into their bodies really efficiently and effectively. Whereas someone that is like in not as good of health, or just from a genetic point of view doesn't process sugar nearly as well, they might need a much lower carbohydrate threshold, more like, more into like the paleo stuff, or even into the borderline keto or keto, right? Like it all depends on how your body processes sugar and the hormones that are involved with that.
So the one thing that I've noticed when taking a break from sugar is that my energy levels have changed throughout the day.
Yeah.
They seem a little bit more stable than having like these high peaks and these crashes. If somebody's looking to regulate their energy levels and make sure they have enough energy throughout the day, if they feel sluggish all the time, what are the things, even besides sugar, that they should be looking at?
Yeah. So sugar is a really big one. So what you're experiencing there is energy levels, but it's blood sugar fluctuations. So when you have lots of added sugar in your diet, you can get really big fluctuations in your blood sugar levels, which make you feel like you've got a lot of energy, and then, holy crap, you're crashing and you have no energy. And then what you typically do when you feel like you have no energy, especially if you're not paying attention, is to gravitate towards something that will give you quick energy, which sugar. You gravitate towards sugar, so you go back up. You feel good for a little while, and then you crash again. And so you set yourself up for this really roller coastery cycle with energy. So yes, look at your sugar intake if you're struggling with roller coastering energy levels. Sleep is a really big one. I know you've talked a lot about sleep, but sleep deprivation is epidemic in our society, and we need sleep. So I think we need to quit pretending that like we can function on 5, 6, even 7 hours of sleep is way too little for some people, right? So 8, 9 hours of sleep as your like normal standard night, and then every now and then you can handle a 6 hour of sleep a night, but like that shouldn't be your baseline. Stress levels, caffeine.
Don't go there.
Yeah, like if you're reliant on caffeine as like a continual pick-me-up throughout the day.
Do you drink? You drink coffee?
I do.
You drink like a cup a day?
I drink like a cup and a half a day.
Yeah, and I think I noticed even for myself that I don't need it. I need it, but I don't use it for energy, basically.
Right.
Like I'm not like in the middle of the day, oh, I need my second cup, oh, I need my third cup.
Right.
I'm like, I drink it for pleasure in the morning,
Yes.
but that one cup I feel like hasn't created a dependency for energy for me.
Right. And I think that's where you got to look at it, right? If in the morning you have a cup to help you wake up, or just because you enjoy it, okay, that's fine. Or even if you have 2 cups, in the course of the morning. It's where you're feeling like you need the afternoon cup, you need the evening cup, or soda, for example, right? Like there's lots of people, unfortunately, that have sodas in the afternoon or in the evening, and part of that is because they feel these energy dips. And even if it's diet soda, it's still giving you caffeine.
When we're looking at our diet from like a bird's eye view, and sugar's obviously a part of it, but what should we really be thinking about when we're trying to live a healthy lifestyle and trying to eat better?
I mean, the sleep thing, sleep is foundational for me. I don't think that you can really have a healthy lifestyle or claim you have a healthy lifestyle without making sleep a priority every day. So sleep, sugar, absolutely. Processed foods in general, right? And the nice thing about like removing processed foods is that it does a whole bunch of things at once. It takes out the added sugar, or at least drastically reduces it, and by doing that, you automatically start consuming whole food sources of the things that you want to eat, which will increase the vitamin and mineral content and just get rid of a lot of junk. So that seems like a really good starting place for most people, is eat real food.
When we were talking online, you were helping me initially kind of break down some of the stuff and understand sugar, carbs, and all this. You mentioned that we should be trying to have a balanced diet. What does that mean?
So balanced in terms of, you can look at it a couple different ways. You can look at balance from a macronutrient point of view, so carbs, fats, protein, or you can look at it from like a food group point of view. I tend to try to encourage people to think of it more food group based and less macro based, because the numbers associated with macronutrients can get really neuroses inducing. But when you think of it more in terms of food groups, so what are the main food groups, right? Like, so you got vegetables, fruits, meat, protein if you want to look more broadly, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, dairy, eggs. Like, you can parse out the food groups a little differently depending on how your mind works. But the idea is that you want to have lots of vegetables, lots of good sources of proteins, and less like fruits and like easily digested carbohydrates, right? And so the balance, meaning like you're getting proteins and fats and carbohydrates in reasonable proportions to each other. And that when you do that, whether you look at it from a food group point of view or from a macronutrient point of view, you help avoid the blood sugar fluctuations that we talked about earlier. So if you're not eating a meal that's purely carbohydrate, that's going to be more likely, or if you're not eating a pure carbohydrate meal, you're less likely to be experiencing those blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day. Whereas if you're really focusing on carbs, or if you have a really carb-heavy meal, even if there's no added sugar in it, it still is going to like impact your blood sugar, and you're still going to have a high blood sugar level for a while, and it's still going to come down pretty substantially afterwards.
All right, so to wrap up, I'm going to do a rapid fire. Some confusing topics and areas in which people have a lot of opinions about online, but I wanted to go to an expert. But here's the thing, you can only reply in one sentence or less. What are your thoughts on this? Okay.
One sentence response?
Yeah, one sentence response. One sentence or less, meaning you don't respond. I don't know what I was trying to get from that. Gluten.
Fine for some, in moderation, terrible for others, period.
You used a semicolon, I like it. Paleo.
Pretty solid framework.
Fat.
Good.
Saturated fat.
Also good for most people.
Cold showers.
Brutal.
Carbs.
Not as bad as everyone thinks they are.
Protein shakes.
Can be good, can be terrible.
What about vegan protein shakes? Can be good, it can be terrible.
Oof, I've had rough luck with vegan protein
Really?
shakes. Yeah, but I'm sure there are some better ones out there that I've found so far.
Multivitamins.
A good supplement to take if they're of high quality.
Great, that's it. Thank you so much for doing this interview. You helped me out a ton.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Where should we send people for your stuff?
Minimalwellness.com.
Easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very easy.
Nice, cool. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
That was great. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you again so much for subscribing here on Patreon. It means the world to me. Can't thank you guys enough. Hope you continue to enjoy this new format, this new exploration of what a podcast/interview series is. I got to rebrand. I'm thinking about that now. I think I need like a name for this. Maybe it'll be called Matt's Podcast. It was originally called The Secret Podcast, but I don't know. It's a little corny, isn't it? That's kind of like even the whole podcast, the Ground Up show in general. I felt like I was pushing into corny territory a lot of times, and especially with the naming of the episodes, and it's like overcoming doubt and like all these just corny, and I'm just like, I'm becoming what I hate in the world. Like, I know that a lot of people love it, and I mean, I truly enjoyed a majority of the episodes and interviews that I did, but it's like, I just don't want to be corny. I just want to be real, and I want to have real conversations. And sometimes that's hard when you're out of your depth interviewing somebody whose personality you don't know. And also just the nature of the way that like you have to name a podcast episode. You have all these topics that you talk about that spans 10 to 15, 20 different topics, and yet you have to think of one thing that represents this entire conversation. It's super frustrating, and still something that I'm like finding to be difficult, and I don't know how I'm going to change it going forward. Does this stuff matter? Do you guys give a shit? Maybe, maybe not. I think if you're creative, you kind of get wrapped up and tied into these kind of branding and messaging things, which I think are pretty important. And I think if you do it wrong, it can really hurt you. If you do it okay and you deliver really great content, it doesn't really matter. But I do think that there is there is kind of a tweaking and a perfectionist mentality that can actually lead you to much greater results. If you're able to like get your messaging right, if people understand it, that's really what like the thumbnail on YouTube, that's really what the title is. It's like you're being very thoughtful about how you brand and how you push out this piece of content in the world. If you didn't care about it at all, just upload a black thumbnail and just call it video 1, video 2, video 3. Nobody's going to do that. That's ridiculous. It's not going to work. So there's a balance there where I think you can get away with a lot if you're really great. But I mean, me just being a bit of a perfectionist and also just enjoying the packaging of something, of creating this kind of feel and vibe to something, it's something I'm thinking about more and more, and it's something that's going to change as we go on. I think this all just started with me thanking you guys for watching. But anyway, I'm excited about doing this. This is like actually a lot of fun. This is kind of cool. This to me feels more relaxed and more like I don't give a shit, which is like a good thing. It's not like I don't care about how this is going to come out. It's that I feel less filtered than I might normally. So get ready for some crazy shit. It's going to get weird. Thanks, guys. See ya. Bye.